You ready?
Yeah.
Hi. Hi, everyone. It's Carolina Wheat. I'm a curator for Artfare, and I'm going to be just admitting folks as we go here today as part of our weekly series, Artfare Live Studio Visits. We have Liz Nielsen joining us tonight.
Hello.
Hey, Liz.
Hi.
Thank you so much for being here. And for all of you that are still joining while we're, at a quick switch up of events, thank you so much. Due to unforeseen circumstances, we just got Liz at the last minute. We're really excited to have her here today. Heidi Norton will be postponed into the future late spring, early summer. I know, the only constant is change right now, right? Isn't that right, Liz Nielsen? Don't you like physics?
I do.
Okay. Okay. Wow, getting some folks in here. So guess we'll kind of start up here as I keep getting distracted and letting folks in. I'm really happy to introduce Liz Nielsen, a mid-career American photographer, experimental photographer, according to Wikipedia. And we're here. She's one of the legacy artists that's been on Artfare for the entire time we've been around. At this point, it's 1 year. And we're really excited to have her here today. She's been around, definitely had quite a few solo shows in her professional career in Paris, in Budapest, in London, North Carolina, certainly a handful in New York, as well as exhibited throughout the world, in Berlin and otherwise in group shows, and is definitely it's definitely gotten around the block. It's gotten reviews in the New Yorker, the Guardian, Financial Times, London, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, and some other really fantastic bio things. Thank you, Liz, for being here. We're really excited to have you here today. What you said, geeking out in the dark with Liz Nielsen. Without further ado, I know the way that we're kind of doing this right now is it's difficult, I understand, for you to get to your studio.
Yes, this is true. I can't get to my studio at all, so I'm going to be presenting things that you would see in my studio that aren't out in the world yet, that aren't posted on a website or posted anywhere. Maybe they're never going to be shown. Maybe they will be. It's to be determined, but it's I'm going to be trying to present work that I have shown in the past and then also new things. So I guess I'm going to share my screen now, and then Lena, since I can't see the chat comments while I'm sharing my screen, I'm just going to be counting on you to tell me what kind of questions people are asking while I'm speaking.
Sure thing.
Thank you everyone for being here. And I call my presentation Geeking Out in the Dark with You. And that's because I'm a geek about photography. I'm very technical. As a photographer with a camera, I'm super technical. And now I'm working without a camera. So, and often without an enlarger. So I'm kind of my own camera. I'm my own timer. I'm my own ISO. I have a sense of what the light's going to do. So mostly I work lensless. However, you see an image here where you can tell that there's a negative involved. So there's negative on top of photogram. I have a couple images like that. And the process I use is very experimental. I'm constantly trying to push the boundaries of what photography is. And I work in total darkness, and everything I make is a unique work. So you can't really create it twice, no matter what. Some of them can be created more similarly depending on how many layers are involved, but they're all unique. Okay, so before I get started, I just wanted to step back for a second because right now I don't have access to my studio, but also I was in a residency program at the McCall Center for Arts and Innovation in Charlotte. And here is my studio there. And this is all the work that I created since I've been there. And that was from January until the end of April. So technically I'm still there, but I'm not there because no one is there. And if you're an artist out there on Artfare, apply for this residency. It's awesome. You get your own studio, you get your own condo, and there's an incredible staff there and community in Charlotte. So it's called the McCall Center for Arts and Innovation. I just have to pimp that out there because it's really good. Anyway, I was there. Then I flew to Doha, Qatar, where I had an exhibition at VCU Qatar. And this was a 3-person show. And I went there on March 5th and I came back on March 13th. So this is where I was. And then I came back and then it was going to be lockdown. So I was either going to not go back to Charlotte, which I had a flight to go back to, or stay in New York and be quarantined with my family. And of course, I'd rather be with my family. So I just stayed. I didn't go back. And I thought, who knows what's going to happen. Okay, so that's where we were. Now I go into my work. A lot of my work is about landscapes. A lot of my work is about abstractions. Both of my concepts, those 2 themes are intending to lead one toward transcendence of some sort. So this is the volcano backdrop. So it looks like a backdrop. If you look at the left side, it almost looks like paper rolled around a photographic backdrop, but it's landscape. And I'm a light painter in some senses. I'm definitely a photographer, but photograms started without the lens at all. And it's the earliest form of photography. And it was created by light being recorded on top of paper, mostly for scientific reasons. But now I'm using it in a contemporary way. So I'm basically exposing one-to-one contact prints onto the paper. So here you have mountains, which are also abstractions. I really like the play between what shapes fall forward and backward. And this one looks like it could be the same image, but it's just got the same infrastructure underneath. Most of my work doesn't necessarily have this, but sometimes I do this. And I put this in there just to present the fact that no matter what, it's going to be unique. Like I created many different layers on top of each of these, but there's just no way for it to come out the same because I'm playing with light. I've got the liquid sunset and the rainbow. And this piece, a lot of these pieces I was going to say, you can't tell the scale when I'm showing them just on the screen like this, but this is a large piece. This is like 50 by 80-ish inches. A lot of the reoccurring themes, you'll see rainbows inside my landscapes. Here's another one. This is called the liquid rainbow. And this piece was inspired by this piece, which is called the aura. And sometimes I'll make a piece and then I go back to that piece because I was really attached to it. It's almost like energy coming out of the head. Here you can see more to scale. This is the show I had at SoCo Gallery, which is in Charlotte. And this is where I was actually going to have another show coming up at the end of April, but I think now it's postponed till August, TBD. The show is called Triangle Moon, the next show. This is called Tracing the Azimuth.
These install shots are great, and they really do give a better idea of scale, and even you can see the glossiness kind of as the refractive quality of the light on the really glossy paper when they're kind of shot from an angle. But I'm wondering, as you just opened up with a handful of different images that all seemed so different. I mean, they're all very vibrant with color, yet some have these softer edges like the rainbow, or perhaps the liquid rainbow, I think you were calling it, but the piece that's on the right side in this install shot. And then some have harder edges like the piece that's to the right, and some of the triangular pieces, and then you look at this piece on the far left, also at an angle, that has this other kind of like watery softness to it. Is there a kind of rhyme or reason as to how you differentiate kind of maybe the process versus the actual, product? Like the works feel like they're coming from a different way of exposure, I guess. And I don't know, I've also seen some of your checklists and descriptions say things like photogram or light painting or photograph or chromogenic unique, and I'm just wondering if you can kind of like help us navigate that a little bit, or help us understand maybe like what's the difference between a photogram versus when you call something a photograph or a light painting, or when you're maybe, this is a long-winded question, sorry, but like maybe you're working towards your you make your handmade negatives, or you're working in the dark. I don't know, maybe some folks here might want to get a little bit better understanding as to how you're
Yeah, no, it's good you asked me that anyhow. Basically, okay, so I go about each different piece differently. There's not always the same technique on every piece. So there's that. But secondly, I work flat, and everything that you see is a one-to-one contact print. So depending on what kinds of like masking or layering devices, different layers of transparency, different types of light, timing, different ways I'm working on top of the paper. It is connected to painting in a sense, because of the way that the light falls. Could be like watercolors or something like this, but it's also connected to printmaking because everything has to be layered in a certain order, and everything has to be done in a certain order. And then it's photography, definitely, because it's light being recorded onto paper. And there's ways that I came to it as a photographer. So I think it's kind of important just knowing that I'm a photographer. Like, I'm always thinking about this, like my work it pushes boundaries of photography, and it falls into other mediums, and it connects to painting and printmaking, but it is also photography. So it's just something to be thought of. But yeah, everything is unique. You can't make the same thing twice. And I do differentiate. Sometimes I call something a photograph if I have used the lens in some way, either the enlarger or camera. None of the pictures that you're looking at this exact moment that I'm talking have the lens or the enlarger in them. But sometimes I do use that as one of the layers. So then I'll call it a photograph, because I feel like because there's some part of it that could be recreated the same way, or just, I don't know why I do that. I guess it's just traditional language of what would be a photogram, which would be the one-to-one contact print of recorded light from an object. Usually people use keys and things like this for traditional photography for photograms, like what's known as objects being placed on the paper. And I'm placing objects on the paper too. A lot of the objects I place on the paper are created objects, but I can also place anything on the paper. It's the way that I place it on the paper that you won't know what it is.
So as you're advancing the slides, please.
Sorry.
How, this piece in particular, the title I believe is Acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
It's just so different from so many of the other more geometrical works that you create in the abstract forms that you're making. This feels so much more like a landscape, or like a liquid, more watery color, light bleed. Was this, I mean, it just almost doesn't fit in the show that you were just showing. Like, talk.
I mean, yeah, some of the pieces have like more layers on top than others. Like this piece specifically only has 5 layers on top of it, and so less. But it's the way that it's lit that creates this kind of opening to another dimension. I call it acceptance because I feel like you're being drawn toward that light in the middle, and I'm not, without getting too hokey or whatever, this is like just what happens sometimes. I mean, a moth gets drawn to a flame, we get drawn toward things, and I feel like you just accept because that's all you can do. So, but yeah, this one is a little different. I mean, some of them have different things. Like this one here is a light painting, but has edges like some of the other works that could be more harder, that, like that could have different objects on them. So they change, like looking at this edge versus looking at this edge versus looking at this edge. It's just the way that I'm placing things on top of the paper and the way that I light it. So it changes. It's dependent upon the piece. Am I answering your question?
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting to see the variances of the overlapping translucencies of and the variances of color, and and how the forms, sometimes they have gradients in them and sometimes they're just flat. So it's compelling to differentiate that. It feels, just a lot, as you are an experimental photographer, it feels like a lot of experimentation. Do you have plans when you go in the dark room, or is like this all kind of happenstance?
I mean, it's totally planned. I feel like if I went in just without a plan, I would come out with crap and waste paper. I've done that before. It just is not effective for me. Yeah, I'm kind of a big planner on it. The thing is I'm working with light, so I can have everything planned, and then things are going to shift a little bit. Not always. I have a lot of control in the dark, and I have a lot of control with light. I've been studying it, well, specifically since around 2001, light on photographic paper, and on film. But yeah, there's a lot of ways where things could shift a little, but not so much. Like a lot is planned. I mean, when you're looking at, like, for instance, this slide or any of these past slides, you can see it's a photograph because you can see the edge, right? You can see how the light bleeds. But a lot of times I'm aiming toward this almost black. It's like a deep red or a deep brown, and it's just because I'm trying to bring out the most amount of color, as many colors as possible, without hitting black. Because if I go to black, I lose a little bit of the wavelength. So I'm basically trying to hover on the edge of the wavelength between red and black. So some of my pictures, when you see the photographs, they're not black. They're just deep, deep red or deep, deep brown. They're like almost black, but not a true black. Anyway, I jump into the color wheel. I hope that helps a little bit, but I jump into the color wheel because this is like a teaching moment, but I put it in anyway because a lot of people think of pigment mixing, and now that we are so digital, we know about light mixing, but we don't really think about light mixing on paper in photography. So like you see on the left, the color wheel, which is like yellow is opposite of purple, orange is opposite of blue. On the right, you see magenta opposite of green, cyan opposite of red. We don't think about the fact that when we move into that light wheel, red and green mixed together is yellow. We just don't think about that because it would be brown. But I'm thinking about that. And then I'm also thinking about how when I make yellow with red and green, when it goes to the paper, it becomes blue. So then that's the opposite. So there's just a lot that's happening, but it's just like anything. It's like you get used to it. It seems like a lot at first, but you do connect to it. So like here I put the R on the cyan because that's red, what red would make on the paper. So if you put red on the paper, you get cyan. If you put cyan on the paper, you get red. So I just connected it into this so people can think of it. But it's just like anything. It's like you learn how to bat or play golf, or everything feels awkward at first, but then it becomes intuitive. Okay, so here I have the Dream River.
I love some of that because it just feels it is a teaching moment, and some folks in chat are saying thank you. I know you can't.
Good.
So you're basically you've memorized the variations of color frequencies, light frequencies in relationship to those colors, and then the opposite or additive light, is that what it's called?
Yeah, it's additive light. And G says is the further green you have magenta, because that's what color you get from the magenta. It takes, you get used to it. It's just like anything. It's like first learning how to bat or golf or something where everything feels really weird, but then it becomes intuitive as you continue to work with it.
Liz,
So like if you
oh
yeah, go ahead.
I have a question in the chat. I think it's a good one. Sarah Silks is asking, how long is each exposure typically?
It depends. I mean, it depends on your intensity of your lights, and it depends on what kind of transparencies or masks you're putting it through. So like that question is kind of tricky because it could be fast, like a second, or it could be long. Like I've had times where I've exposed something for 6 straight hours. So and received a color like the cyan of this lake, you know. So it just depends on in what amount you're using it and in what way. Like, yeah, it's I think that the question is a little tricky. Like I don't want to give an exact example, but there's so many ways that you can put the light onto the paper, and times. So like here, I don't know, this is separate, but like if you think of like the blue on the lakes, those would have come from like yellows or reds or oranges. Hopefully that helps a little bit. Hi, Sarah. I know Sarah Silks. Good to hear your question. Okay, so then I have another one, which is I call this the Space Mountain folds, and it connects to this other piece that's here, which is like it's called the Jewel Mountain. So you can see how like the large scale of it. A lot of them are mountain like. I'm really into these like folding mountain shapes, and they don't really come from specific mountains. Although lately I've been studying a lot of actual landscapes and merging them together. So here I am in my studio, and how I photograph my work is I have to put there's a curtain behind me. You can see it on the left. I have to put a black velvet curtain and have my camera go through it to photograph my artwork because it's so shiny that I need to absorb all of the reflections in it.
So you're literally taking digital photographs of your analog photographs in order to sell them, correct?
Yes, that's exactly it. In fact, to be honest, I could use another photographer other than myself for the documentation process. And that's just because I really don't have all of the equipment I need for creating the images that I want for perfect documentation. So when you see all the images in this slide presentation, I took them, but they could look better if somebody else had taken them with like a program like Capture One that plugged into the computer and I have just 2 hot lights on the side usually when I'm shooting. Sometimes a third over my head, but even my 2 hot lights don't have the same luminosity. It's just like I'm always thinking, oh, I'll fix it, and I haven't. But I could use another photographer.
So I mean that kind of brings up a question that I know that I've heard in circles when looking at your work in real life. I mentioned at the beginning of this how translating this analog photograph with the CMYK into a digital file that you're on Artfare, right? You're working hard to manage your inventory that's not consigned to other galleries on Artfare, trying to sell on an online platform. Do you I mean, how is that working for you? Or do you feel that it's really necessary to get someone in front of your work in order to kind of seal the deal?
Yeah, actually, the people that have purchased my work from on Artfare have either seen my work in person, or they've either seen that exact piece in person, or they've seen my work in person in the past, so they kind of knew. But I think that's one thing that's the whole point of me being on Artfare, is that like I would get someone in my studio, so they would see the work online and then they want to get in and see it actually in real life, because I definitely think it looks 100 times better in real life, because the way that the light sits on the paper is, it looks like it's on the paper and in the paper, you know, and when you see it on screen, it's flat. So, I mean, yes, the goal would be to see it in person, and studio visit, I think, would help that. Art fair also, though, is like, it's another language that's current. It's like so contemporary right now to have, I mean, even more than ever right now during COVID, but like in general, it's like I know that I have to have my work online moving forward. It's just like 15 years ago when someone was like, you better have a website, you better have it. It's more important than a business card. And I got a website, you know, and actually that was really important. And I feel like now, having people having access to my work on something other than where a gallery puts my work. I have galleries that put my work up on Artsy and things like this, but I control what goes on Artfare. So
Thank you. There's another question in the chat room, and I think it's really appropriate that Deanna is, not only does she love your work, but she's also asking, how are you handling these huge sheets without smudging or touching the surface all over? I know dents can be a problem. And then there's another question after that, but perhaps it would be time to kind of address the type of, I don't know, secrecy in your process, because Anna Luke also asks, you know, whether the process, in a nutshell, whether the process is really the important part of your work, or is it, you know, your concept and the invention of creating these experimental photographs / light paintings and these abstract images. I know that Fuji had done a video. Maybe it's time to just play that to give folks a little bit of an idea of what it's like to be handling the work or in the darkroom.
okay, yeah, I'll show the video, but first, just to answer those questions as like succinctly as I possibly can. It's taken me a lot to learn how to handle the work in the dark, because it is a whole body situation. Like I'm down, I wear knee pads, I'm down on my knees a lot. And in order to move the paper, there's ways that I have to fall with it, almost like I'm riding a horse or something, because there's a lot of ways that it can dent. I do not wear gloves, actually. I have accepted fingerprints because I just have to. I'm afraid I'll drop the paper, which I have dropped the paper in the dark before. Sometimes this does happen, but I'm also sliding things across the top. So even this really shiny paper does actually get a little bit scratched sometimes. I try to be as careful as I can. I'm actually very anal about it, but and everything has to go in a certain order. So in a way, I mean, it's just practice. It's getting used to it. I literally like couldn't tell the difference between the front and the back of the paper when I first started printing color. So I'd have to be like licking it in the darkroom to see which side was sticky. But then the other question to answer Anna Luke is that like a lot of it is about the process, and I'm always pushing my own boundaries of what I can do. So some of that secrecy is just because I've been working so long to create each different thing that I do, that like some of it is a lot harder. And I know if I told people how to do it, they wouldn't necessarily just be able to go do it. That's true. But I do hold some of that because it's been like a study of, like a personal scientific study of experimentation that I've arrived at. So I do hold some of that carefully. Okay, so wait, let's go into this video, because actually Fujifilm did video me. I let them video me in the dark, making, I think it was 2 separate pieces. So this is going to show some of the process, because this is how a couple of the pieces were made. I'm gonna click it. I think everyone should be able to, wait, I didn't do it right. I forgot to do it something. I have to go out of the sharing. Sorry guys, I'm a little bit new with it. Okay, everything is there.
No worries.
Okay, I'm playing it. This is 2 minutes.
I'm very interested in like meaning of life, and I'm always thinking about it. Going into physics and trying to understand like the universe and how little we know about it actually, but what we do know is so exquisite. I used to shine rave lights and things like that into my camera so I could figure out how the film was sensitive to different colors of light. And now I'm working like that on the paper. I like the darkroom in that it is the absence of light. Like I used to rehearse before I started. Open the box, unroll the paper, take out the knife, cut the paper, shut the knife, put the knife back in your pocket, shut the box, touch the box, be sure it's shut. Then put the paper down. The paper is just such a cool thing because it's sensitive to light. I guess it's just like film. But I'm just bypassing the camera. I am looking for the way that the light's going to sit on the paper. So in this case with Fujiflex, it does look like the light is on the paper, and it also looks like the light is inside the paper. It's like so glossy, it has this liquid feel to it. It's almost like you can just experience yourself going into the paper because of it. I think of myself strongly as a photographer, even though my medium is light, and I recognize that I'm doing a little bit of painting with light. Essentially, when it comes down to it, it's photography because it is light. It's all about light.
So that was kind of like a little sneak peek, I suppose, of you working the magic in the dark room. It was that like
Oh no, hold on. Sorry.
Having been to
I had this. I'm sorry about that. Here it comes. But go ahead, Lena.
I was wondering whether or not. So so that it felt kind of like a commercial. Is that it was like a Fujifilm sponsorship situation?
Yeah. Okay. So that kind of was, and it started because I showed some work in Amsterdam. There's a photo fair there called Unseen, and during that fair, the first time I presented there, one of the engineers that creates the paper was at the fair, and apparently he was like looking at my photographs like with his nose almost touching them. And so then one of the gallery directors came over to him and said, hey, that's Fujiflex paper. And he was like, yeah, I know, I've just never seen anyone use it like this. So because of that, in the following 2 years after that, Fuji actually brought me out to do a lecture at that fair, and because of that, then they decided to make a profile of working with the paper, because the way that I'm working with the paper is I'm actually like treating the paper like it's film itself. And I said that on the video, it's like I'm bypassing the camera altogether. But sometimes the camera's involved, like this one, I have an image behind it. But a lot of times I don't. So like this would be just directly on top of the paper. But outside of the process of it, just in that, like when it comes to like the portals, like I just want to talk about the ideas in them too a little bit, because I just am really attached to the ideas. The portals there's a whole bunch of them that I created. I mean, many, and they're basically supposed to be, they're triangles, they're folds in time, they're folds in space. They're also mountains. If you look at them and flip them downward, they could become a path. They could become a boat. I think they're basically places inside of space that could lead you toward a creative breakthrough. So it's a little switch gears, but I just wanted to say it because there's so many of them, and I'm just really interested in the idea of the portal. I'm also interested in hotspots on Earth. So where a portal would exist on Earth, where energy hotspots are, where people go and gravitate. to experience that. But then also because they go there and they go there collectively, it becomes more of a hot spot. There's a lot of the different portals, and they all have different names. And some of them aren't portals, but I call these the mountain paths, and they're basically like many pathways and mountains inside of each other. So this is like a classical shape. I feel like people use this shape a lot, but for me, it does different things. Like I fold each one of the mountains into its many mountains and into its many paths. Okay. These are actual photographs that I took, and contact sheets of those. And they're basically studies of shape, but they've been manipulated as well. And one of the things that I like to photograph is the ground. So I'm constantly walking around photographing the sidewalk. And I actually do a lot of photography with this because I feel like it's like practicing my scales. Like I'm always trying to train my eye as a photographer. So in these, they were black and white negatives, then projected onto my wall, like reshot into black and white slides, and then printed in the color darkroom. And at that point, I placed like layers on top of them. So you can see little moments of like triangles and things like this that weren't necessarily in the original photograph, but it's just slight layers of triangles and things like this. You can see my interest in triangles on the ground. I mean, it's like a lot of the stuff that you start thinking about, then you start seeing it everywhere. So these photographs then become photographs in the bottom middle. I'm manholes, like they're always so interesting. I like gum stains on the ground, oil marks, cracks in the sidewalk. But then the manholes became the moons, and the moons are something that I've been invested in for quite some time. I've been making moons since about 2012. And when you look at the moons, basically a lot of the action's in the edges, but what they come from is the idea of a universe that's collapsing instead of expanding. So it would be as if some people do believe that there's a theory that that the universe will eventually stop expanding and then start collapsing, and it's called the Big Crunch. And then it would do that back and forth infinitely, and that would be called the Big Bounce. And I have really gravitated toward that idea. It just made me think of life, like just literally when you watch like evolution of baby crawling up to like middle height down to like aging and shrinking down a little bit. I just started thinking about it as a cycle. So the moons basically are from one perspective as if everything is eclipsing back on top of each other and would eventually go back into like a big bang, but it would be like a big shrink. Shifting time. And I usually start with drawing. So then now moving out of like the moons, these are totems. So another theme within my work is these totems. They start with doodles and drawings, and then they start to become shapes. And these are several different totems that I've created. And totems is something that sometimes when I don't know what to make, I'll start like working on things that I've made before, like totems or moons. Like lately I've been working on these moons that I call the triangle moons, which is an upcoming show I have. And the triangle moons actually become stars because as the edges shift, they start to become stars. But in the past, this might be along the lines of like flat earthers or something, but in the past it's been thought that the moon could have been a triangle. So that's where it started. That's separate than the totems, but here's the totems. They come from classical shapes of circles, triangles, rectangles, but those shapes are very contemporary still.
You seem to have a lot of kind of reoccurring themes, whether they're totems or the moons, the different references to the triangles or the portals. And now we have the stones. Naming your work. Someone has asked, Anna Lucas asked also, how do you go about naming your work? And also someone had asked in the chat, maybe you can address while you're continuing advancing, please. The amazing that you're doing in relationship to, you know, would you consider presenting these two-dimensional works in a different way, perhaps not on a wall, different planes opposed to a wall? Or perhaps you can talk a little bit about, someone else had asked, the relationship to landscape and the natural world. So the kind of naming conventions, whether you want to show the work or interested in showing the work off the wall, and then, you know, landscape within the natural world. And if you can address that maybe while you're advancing, it'd be awesome.
Yeah, okay, I know. I'm thinking, yes, I'm interested in showing them in different locations. I'm open to it, I should say. Some of the work that I made that's not even in this presentation includes those levels of background and foreground. I guess it kind of could be like the photogram with the background. I'm skipping a lot of things by advancing quickly, but it's okay. I'm just thinking, I would, and I have some work that I'm creating now that's on this clear film that could be shown. Definitely, it is installation based. It's going to become that. So yes. And then what was the other question? Oh, naming conventions. Usually what I do with my work for my naming conventions is that I look at the work and let it speak back to me, because I have this feeling about, I make the work, I'm very invested in it, but once it's made, it's not mine anymore. Like I mean, it is mine, but I feel like I'm separate than it. So at that point, I have to let it speak back to me, and I find out what is it saying, and what it's saying is then what I see. So it becomes an interpretation of it. These are the landscape shapes. I know I skipped a few things. I mean, I missed talking about entanglement and the
You can still talk about it.
Oh yeah, here's one that can be like, I'm just thinking about it because I have to go fast, I realize, because yeah. But some of the themes inside of it, like this piece specifically, it's called, these are from a body of work called Entanglement, and it's just about the two particles becoming entangled upon meeting, and Einstein calls that spooky action at a distance, because what happens is once two particles become entangled, they're never not entangled, and if you know something about one of them, you automatically know something about the other. So I presented work based on this, and entanglement can even be inside of one image. So quantum physics presents entanglement as something that's not one thing, but two things. So I like that inside of an image. Sometimes one image isn't enough. That's why two images do better together. Or for instance, this image, it's called The French Kiss. It's a landscape, but it's also two people kissing. So it's got like two separate views to it. And I would hope that one person would see both those things, maybe at different moments, not necessarily in the same moment, or maybe at the same moment. Or two images that mirror each other can also be entangled. Some of them are inverted. It's just the way particles behave outside of classical physics. The castle. The backyard cosmos. This one is also doing a lot of the abstraction where it falls in front and behind you. And I call it the backyard cosmos because I feel like it has this feeling of a backyard with a shed. So to answer one of the questions again, naming conventions. So this is its entangled partner. Okay. I know, then the stones continue. The stones are a definite, like, I constantly am going back to the stone theme. Or landscapes. This landscape is called the double landscape, which is a current theme inside of my work, which these landscapes are intended to be viewed multi-directionally. So my intention is that they could be viewed upside down or right side up. Viewing them from one standing point is not necessary. And they are more than one landscape merged together, but compositionally, their intention is to be viewed from many different angles. So this is like 50 by 80 inches. And then this one I just made in January or February, and it's intended for the same thing. And this one as well. All of these are like, but they're really large, like 50 by 70 or 50 by 80. They come from the landscapes I'm merging are Utah, landscapes from Utah, and then Middle Eastern landscapes.
What is the largest one of these photographs that you've created? Sounds gargantuan, being 50-inch by 70, 100, and have you gone any bigger than that?
100 by 100 inches is the largest I've made works. I have one of those coming up in here, but they can't be made. The widest I can get the paper is 50 inches wide. So it would basically be in increments of 50 and then at whatever length. But I can't make them too long without breaking them apart. One, for framing reasons, but two, because when I call it flying the plane, but when I put the paper through the paper or the processor, there's barely any room for error. So you have to get it going through super evenly. And if it shifts at all, then you ruin your whole print. The machine can eat the print. I stopped on these because they're on clear film. These are 50 by, or like maybe 80 tall or 70 something tall by 50 wide, and they're completely transparent. So this goes back to the question of, could they be an installation? My intention is for them to come off the wall, be framed in a way that is clear on both sides and lit from both sides, so that the image falls onto the wall. It's something I'm working on right now. I haven't shown these at all yet. I've been working on it for like a year, but it's still in its process. Here I put in a sculpture just because this is currently up in New York. It's and I basically have just like light beaming out of these trash cans. I made a neighborhood night light, and it's solar activated, so it only lights up at night. I feel like it connects to my work, even though it's sculpture. I plasma cut the shapes. Okay, then there's some more landscapes. I might have overdone it with the slides, but I did this because I didn't want to get stuck too long on certain slides. It's harder to talk online because no one's standing in front of you, so I want to make sure everyone's like excited and interested.
There's there's so many different qualities, as we kind of were talking about at the beginning, or this like light leak aspect where the line is kind of porous, soft at the edges, whereas you have these harder edged lines, and then a lot of geometric shapes or abstract shapes kind of become something. I was just wondering, do you find your viewers or the folks that your fans of your work, do you see people leaning more towards things that are representational or recognizable, like a landscape in Utah mixed with Qatar? Or do you find folks prefer to see the more modern or abstractions that are less like a plant, for instance?
Yeah, I mean, actually, people tend to tell me that they like the things that are more abstract, that aren't representational. They tell me that more often, but I don't know. I mean, I'm making whatever I'm making, so I tend to be interested in representational things too. Like a lot of the representational or the abstractions that I make come from representational things in the first place. But I don't know. I mean, I guess it's a mixed bag. But a lot of people do kind of like they like feeling that abstraction. But I mean, I don't know, that's just not always what I'm going for. But I mean, sometimes I am going for that because I'm very interested in abstraction. And a lot of times I feel like the work that I'm making, sometimes I feel like the audience doesn't understand it yet. And I think that's probably true for a lot of feeling. It's almost like the audience isn't like, they don't get it yet, or they're not ready for it, or whatever. And maybe I don't know what that sounds like to say, but I think in time, sometimes there's been moments where people have seen a work and they've been like, why didn't you show me this last year? And I'm like, I did, but they just weren't, they didn't see it then. It's almost like you don't like a color until you've gotten familiar with it. You know, like, remember when like that pink hit and everyone was like, what is this color? And then somehow everyone fell in love with it. So I don't know. These are some black and whites. They're representational too. I mean, I personally love them, but I don't know. Like, I haven't shown them yet. I just made them recently. I put in things that are, you would only see in the studio in this presentation. So I did that just purposely because this is a studio visit. And I guess I'm testing the waters on some of it too. Like, you know, people haven't seen my black and white in ages, but I have it and I'm making it. Sometimes I take work, I put these in together because this piece called Glacier Crackle, based on like climate change, I love this piece, and so it inspired this piece. So sometimes I'll go back to pieces that I made just to inspire myself for the next piece. Sometimes I'd make a piece like this and it got inspired from something I saw at the airport. This is a display at the airport. It's just beautiful to me. I mean, this was kind of the side of the display. I think there was like a car or a motorcycle on the other side, something like really being advertised. And I was like, ooh, the light looks beautiful here. And so I did it. Both of this connects to it. The volcano. How am I doing on my time? I have like, I think there's probably like 25 more slides.
Well, I think that folks are very interested. You've got a great fan club over in the chat room. There are a handful of questions I haven't really been able to address. So we're gonna get to questions towards, you know, the last 15 minutes. So you're rocking and rolling. I got 12 minutes left there, Liz Nielsen.
Okay. Yeah. This is the water pyramid.
The water pyramid. You have so much work, and it's really great to see them all, you know, here in one place. I'm wondering, and maybe others are too, do you ever, are these works, we know they're for sale through your galleries, we know they're for sale through Artfare when you manage your own inventory, yet does anyone, or have you done any kind of commission-based works? Have organizations like corporations reached out to you to do any, you know, take your designs, I guess? I'm not so sure how to place that question, but.
Yeah, like there was one I presented, which was the liquid that was, I basically sold the copyright of that piece. That doesn't mean I can't sell the piece. I already did sell the piece, but two of them, it was called Shy Girls. And then there was a pink moon in one of them that I sold to Murakami for a book cover. And then there was another one, it was a totem. I sold Penguin books for another book called Transcendence or something like this. So yes, but like these pieces right here that I was just about to show, so you're like psychically on time. The piece on the left is called Diet of the Stars, and the piece on the right is an invitation that I created for Hermes. So I did for a fashion event, and I've done a couple different projects with Hermes. There's a couple in here, but I have been commissioned to do things, and I'm willing to be commissioned because I need to make money. So I'm always like, that sounds exciting. Not always, but a lot of times. And I'm making money through art too, but I mean, we're artists, so we're just kind of constantly trying to find new avenues to make money. So Hermes contacted me. They said, we love the Diet of the Stars piece, which was their initial piece that they showed me. We want you to do something, but we want the horse in it. So that's their Hermes horse. So I created this piece. It's a photogram, but then I scanned the photogram, and then I ended up working on it in Photoshop. So it's actually part digital. I have digital skills too, even though I work analog. I put in a couple of these quickly, but they're basically, I've been teaching young students fashion photography in China. And these are their shots. They shot them, but I lit them and set them up and did all the technical parts to help them because they have an idea and we're working together. But they made the clothing and everything, and then the concept. And then this is something I did with Paul Smith in London at the London store, and I did this with the gallery I work with there called Black Box Projects. Paul Smith reached out and said, would you be interested in showing work at this with us alongside of this certain collection? And I said, yes, let me contact my gallery. So through the gallery, we did the show and sold work through it. So these are a couple pieces from the show. This is another project through Hermes. It's sculpture, those triangular sculptures, and then a video in the back. And I worked with a production team so I could come up with the ideas. And then it was presented like that. So I definitely do commissions. I mostly do commissions if it's connected in some way to my work. Like sometimes people have a commission where they're just like, I want you to make me a stone stack or something. Those aren't my favorite ones, but it depends on where I am with like money at the moment. But usually I'm more making what I want to make. Like that's my main goal. But also my main goal is to survive too. So here's a couple images from my studio so you can see the work in situ. Okay, then I made these drawings. I'm almost to the end of the presentation now. So I'm very, did I put these in wrong? Maybe I did, but anyway, I'm interested in visual manifestation. So inside of my journals, I'm always creating ideas of what I want to manifest in my life. And I put art world in there because in order to be an artist, you just have to be part of the art world. It's just part of the deal. In school, people were like, I want to make art, but I don't want to be involved with the things in the art world. And I'm like, well, you have to be involved. So find a way to make yourself like it and fit. And then I have creative breakthrough, which we're all always longing for, our creative breakthroughs, because we want to take bigger steps through space with our ideas. And then I put studio visit in here. Am I blanking out right now because my internet is unstable?
No, it's you're doing pretty good. I need a little time for questions, so get through.
Okay. Yeah, gotta have a studio visit to create a solo show. Okay, small works. I think I'm almost done. This is my blue period. Okay, new work that I just created. I imagine you in a place like this. So this is about somebody passing away. Brand new works. These are just like 2020 works. So I put them in. Different landscapes. This is the view from the ISS. I really wish I could float around on the International Space Station. That's Earth from the ISS. Okay, this is the biggest piece, 100 by 100. Not the biggest, but one of the biggest. Okay, I'm slamming through, but I'm almost done. Okay, so this is what I've been doing during quarantine. Drawing. I turn the black parts of the drawing into the shapes that which I've never really done something quite like this, but I'm using a blade and I'm making these cutouts. I don't know how I'm going to use them exactly yet, but I'm going to use them in the darkroom. So they may be a section of a negative or a layer. Okay, and that's, I think I'm almost done, Lena. I messed that part up. Then I made this. This is my second to the last slide. I just made this. I am super healthy and my body heals itself. This is a mantra that we all have to keep saying because COVID is nearby. And then I end on my cat. Okay, questions, I'm ready. Sorry if I took too much time.
Thank you. No, it's so much work, and it's so great to see the variety of work and the proliferation of the amount of productivity you have. It's really quite incredible. The if you come out of the screen share, you can see some of the questions in the chat. And also there may be a moment to have someone ask a question if you wanted to unmute your mic, engage with Liz. But first, let's just ask a question in relationship to, I love this question from Kara McDonald. It's in regards to your entanglement series, do you ever separate two pieces that are entangled, or do you consider them to be more of a traditional diptych?
Oh, Kara, okay. I love that you asked this question because part of the entanglement series includes separated pieces. Sometimes the pieces are never going to ever meet, but they were created together, so they were entangled together. There's actually been a few that I've made that have a third or a fourth entangled partner. One could call this a series, but from the vantage point that I'm creating, it is not that. It is, they are, I guess, in a sense, but they're entangled. Sometimes they're entangled next to each other in a show, either mirrored or inverted, or sometimes they've been displayed inside of a show in one, like a bookend or something like this. So separately, but in the same exhibition. But many times they have been disconnected. So sometimes when I sell one piece, I've told people, this piece has an entangled partner. I think in a weird way, it makes the piece more powerful because it's also connected to something else, something invisible, another invisible force, which there are many invisible forces out there.
When you're in the dark, do you ever get scared? I mean, so many of your concepts are, so like metaphysical sometimes, or quantum physical sometimes. And I'm just curious, you're working in the color darkroom, it's pitch black. Is it ever like a little spooky?
I mean, I've been working through my fear of the dark to good. I do accept my feelings of fear, and sometimes I'll find myself talking out loud to like nobody, like, if you're here, I'm here too, and I need you to like stay away because I'm making something important, or we can share the space together happily, or I don't even know. There's just been moments where I've found myself doing that, but I also have had moments where I'm like, I don't want to acknowledge that I feel something, because if I acknowledge it out loud, then it makes it actually more physically happening. Mostly I just try not to watch too many scary movies, but my wife and daughter love scary movies. So sometimes I get stuck watching them and then they haunt me while I'm in the dark. Like there's a really scary one called Lights Out. And this one haunts me all the time because the character in the movie can only be seen when the lights are out. Her name's Diana. She's super scary. And sometimes I'll be in the dark and I'm like, I cannot turn around because what if I see Diana? And like, I know I won't, but my main thing lately is I've told myself that I project light. As a human, I have light, even though it's invisible to my own eyes. I believe that I'm projecting some sort of energy, which is light, and therefore I kind of have this like field around me, which I have created. Maybe it's made up, but I don't think it is, and that's kind of protecting. So
it's really interesting you say that, because Francis Waite, hi Francis, asked a great question. Do you ascribe any universal meaning to specific colors that repeat through your work over the years or within a specific series?
Universal meaning towards specific colors. I mean, I don't have synesthesia or anything. However, I do gravitate more toward like blue. And like lately for me, it's been, well, it was green a few months ago, but lately it's been red. don't necessarily put a meaning on them, although I do think about what they mean chakra wise. Like I know about the chakras. So sometimes I'll think like, if I'm using a lot of this color, it might mean this or that. But I more think about like when I'm making a body of work, what colors are going into it. So there's a lot of moments where I'm thinking about, I'm always thinking about what colors, like even whenever I draw my drawings, I like am labeling them with what colors I'm going to make them in the dark. Like exactly what colors, like this is going to be pink and this is going to be red and this is going to be gray. So sometimes in the dark, there's moments where I forget to do one of those things, or I expose something more than once. And then I have to rethink the composition of the whole work because I've already decided what the whole thing is going to look like. Like I don't even listen to music in the dark because it messes my mathematical concentration up because I'm literally counting wavelengths. So yeah, the universal meaning, no, it's just more what I'm drawn to. So I guess it's intuitive in a sense.
Well, thank you so much for your time and for putting that presentation together. I know it's not easy right now, kind of being, you know, in homebound, or just to see everyone here tonight and to be able to interact with folks. It really creates a like a pseudo normalcy, I suppose, and to listen about your work and your ideas. There's a lot to think about. And I know someone had asked earlier, just kind of leave on a note, like, are there any philosophers or writers that you are particularly interested in, or an artist that you feel inspired by, that we can kind of not only be inspired by you, Liz Nielsen, but also, you know, kind of understand where you're navigating yourself within the context of your work and concepts?
I mean, this kind of goes without saying almost, but like Stephen Hawking is so brilliant. Like every time I read anything by Stephen Hawking, I'm still inspired. I like reading artists that have written about surreal. What's inside this field. What book did I recently read that's about basically bringing your future toward you? It's basically about collapsing the particles of the future into your now, which is kind of what I'm doing on the paper. It's called, shoot, I just read this book like 6 months ago. It's called, I can't remember right now. I feel really bad. I don't remember, but it's about basically just think about like what's called the field, or what's existing in dark matter, what exists all around you that can be activated by your consciousness. So I like reading books like that. I believe we have superpower. So yeah, it's just activating it, and with emotion, using your human emotion to activate your superpower will like bring what you want into manifestation.
Was I think maybe it's Becoming Supernatural. Is that what you were thinking of?
Yes, that's the book. It's called Becoming Supernatural, and it's by Joe Dispenza. Is that who wrote it?
Yes.
I think it's Joe Dispenza. I read some of these same authors over and over again. I'm about to read his book called The Placebo Effect. He wrote it before Becoming Supernatural, but Becoming Supernatural is a really fantastic read.
Well, thank you so much. I think your work is rather supernatural, so maybe we'll take some tips on that. Again, thank you everyone for being here this evening. It was a very well attended event. Up to over 70 individuals were able to join the meeting tonight. And every Thursday night from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Artfare is hosting professional artists in their studio or in the space that they're making right now to, again, you know, create some sort of normalcy through the quarantine. and these very historic times. Again, thank you so much, Liz Nielsen. Thank you.
Thank you for being here, everybody. I appreciate it. I know it's not the same as being in the studio, but it's close.
Yeah. We had folks from London. We had folks from all over
Lena.
the country and abroad. So it's feels really great. If you might have missed any of the talk, it is recorded and we'll be uploading it on the Artfare YouTube channel for folks to watch again if you want to catch some of that geeky color theory stuff that Liz was talking about early on in the beginning. All right, I'm gonna end the meeting, everyone. Thanks.
Lena, you're a wonderful interviewer.
Oh, thank you, Liz Nielsen. I'm glad that I have my curator hat on right now for you. And I'm really happy to have the opportunity.
Yeah, you're great.
To interview you. All right. Thank you, friends. The meeting.
Thank you.
Peace out.